Welcome to The Tech Between Us, a podcast that takes a look at the past, present, and future of some of today's most influential technologies. Hi, I'm Raymond Yen, your host and Director of Technical Content at Mouser Electronics, a leading global distributor of semiconductors and electronic components. Today, we're talking about a topic that I'm very enthusiastic about, RISC-V. My first exposure to RISC-V was at a conference back in 2019. While some parts of it weren't quite ready for prime time then, I was immediately struck by the possibilities of the open source ISA, and more so by the passion of the speakers and the people working on it. Fast forward 3 years, and now hardly a week goes by without someone announcing a new application or core or partnership using RISC-V. That's why I'm excited to be talking today with Mark Himmelstein, the CTO of RISC-V International, the governing body of RISC-V, about the latest advancements in the RISC-V specification. Mark, it's great to talk to you again. Welcome to The Tech Between Us.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
As an intro, can you tell me a little bit about what RISC-V International does and kind of your role as CTO within that organization?
Absolutely. So RISC-V is sort of the last in a family of reduced instruction set computers that were started in the 80s in Berkeley with Dave Patterson. It begat the Spark with a C from Sun Microsystems, and then there was RISC-II, RISC-III, RISC-IV, and come around 2010, Chris Asanovich was wanting to do some work, I think, with Vector or some other, kind of instruction set. He didn't have really an instruction set to play with, so he decided to create one. And he did that with the help of his advisor, Dave Patterson, and with his, he was already a PhD, so with a professor and with the help of his students, most notably people like Andrew Waterman and Yunsip Lee and John Hauser. And so they started in doing this just primarily as a way to run experiments to do things about various instruction extensions and things like that. And then it started picking up momentum. And around 2015, they started making it possible to put a nonprofit together. Originally the RISC-V Foundation, now RISC-V International, originally based in the United States, now in Switzerland. And they immediately got incredible interest from a lot of people. We have everybody from Google and Amazon using it to Alibaba and Huawei and Western Digital and Seagate and NVIDIA. And so there's just, tons of people. There's something like 2,500 members, close to 300 institutional or corporate members, and the rest are individual members. We probably have 300 to 500 active members in our technical groups. With probably somewhere around 50 leaders. So it's a fairly big project. It will likely become the second largest open source project in a very short period of time next to Linux. And we look at ourselves really as the Linux of open source hardware. And for me, I was brought in about a year and a half ago because, the organization had grown up through some academics and through some sort of, evolving, processes and stuff. And so when I came in, they had not produced a single spec in 2020. In 2019, they had done a bunch. That was the original stuff with multiply, divide, add, subtract, load, store, branch, those kind of things.
Right. Yeah. Your basic extensions.
Yeah. Basic extensions. And then, they had all these things they'd been working on for years, Vector for 6 years, bit manipulation for 4 years, crypto stuff for about 2 years, and so on and so forth. And so, they fondly, when I got interviewed, they said, this is herding cats, right? And so I have a history of herding cats. I ran Solaris for Sun, about 2,500 people around Sun who contributed to Solaris, and only 500 were in my organization. So I was used to this sort of community cajoling, finding consensus, pushing things slowly, working on getting the left hand talking to the right hand kind of thing. And so the first thing I did was, when I came in, I said, hey, look, how do you know you're done? And there was no answer. And so I said, look, okay, we're going to have something called definition of done. And then, I'm the kind of person who likes to try to help people learn how to fish, I said, look, we're going to have one, and I'll help you make it, but you guys have to make it because you have to live with it. And so there's probably been about 15, 20 policies put in place, everything from, making sure there isn't encumbered information in there to, making sure that we have a fast track version to do things quicker. And so we put all this governance in place, and then we had to execute. And so we had to attract some more leaders. We had to go ahead and figure out how we're going to get things done because the ISA guys aren't the same as the software guys. The software guys are used to this contributor culture that, something like by 2014, 80% of the Linux developers were being paid by their companies to work full-time on Linux. And here you have somebody who's designing an ISA. There are very few of them in the world, let alone in each company. They not only have to do the ISA, they have to go ahead and design the chips. They have to go ahead and design the products that use the chips. And so there's a really big demand on their time. And so we realized very quickly that the architects were needed in order to put the ISA together, the instruction set together, but they weren't the folks who put all the ecosystem together, the software ecosystem, the upstream, the compilers, the operating systems, the hypervisors, the libraries, and so on and so forth. And so we split those things out. We got leaders in place to go drive the software piece, and we started out with one group in software. We're now at like 15, and same thing's true in security. We started out with like kind of one group there, and we're now up to about a half a dozen. And so we got leaders to go ahead and drive the stuff, but then we also needed people to do the actual work. And so some of the work were being done by the groups who were putting the ISA together, but we also created a development partner program where we get institutions to, have some combination of students and professionals and professors to take on big pieces like the compilers for reduced size instructions and stuff like that. So people take on those pieces: architecture tests, formal models, compilers, operating systems, proof of concepts, so on and so forth. And it's been a very successful program. We're always looking for more people. So anybody who wants help at RISC-V.org, you can pony up. And I mean, look, it's very exciting to be in the ground floor of this incredible momentum. This year alone, anecdotally, like we don't require people report, but anecdotally, we know there's probably going to be in excess of 2 billion cores of RISC-V shipped this year.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I mean, given the fact that just, in 2014, like 2015, that was really the first public forum for RISC-V. That's absolutely unprecedented. And everybody that I've talked to about RISC-V, at the various partner companies, at the member companies, everybody is so passionate about RISC-V in the desire to really see it moving forward. I mean, what do you attribute that to? I mean, there have been communities for other things that have, certainly, done things, but really, I think, like you said, short of Linux, I really haven't seen this level of passion in any other community.
Well, I've got to tell you, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, we really enjoy our position in history. Linux did a lot of groundbreaking work in community development and how the contributor culture works. ARM, x86, Power, MIPS, Spark with a C, a bunch of these things. They've all done a bunch of work to get us here to this point in history. And so if you had to say what I would say is the top 3 reasons why people care, number one, the price is attractive. It's free, right? And people have kind of gotten used to not having to pay for the basic technology when it comes to Linux. So Linux really set that paradigm in place. And, people make money by selling products using Linux, or they sell services using Linux, or things like that. And so that is absolutely number one. Number two, very clearly in my mind, and I think, I share, Krista and Dave Patterson's view that it's about flexibility. Not only don't you have to pay for the use of the thing, if you want to go ahead and do something specific, you don't have to pay for customization, and you do have to do that with other architectures. And some things are not allowed in other architectures. We don't care. We have a non-standard extension, the X extension. Anybody can do anything they want. It's qualified by the JEDEC ID. And so if you're doing something, especially in embedded or IoT or automotive embedded or, and any of these things, even edge computing, where it's more targeted, less general purpose computing, you don't care about the general purpose stuff. You can go ahead and do exactly what you need. You can optimize for power. You can optimize for space. You can optimize for speed of a particular application or a particular ML kind of thing down the bottom. And that flexibility, in my mind, I mean, I'm not sure everybody agrees with this, but in my mind, it's almost even more attractive than the original price thing. And then the final thing is really hard to quantify, but there's a pride of ownership around RISC-V. It is the first ISA of this magnitude that was born and grown in open source and in the community.
Right.
The rest were kind of like given, like they were already done. Open Power, Open MIPS, the Spark stuff. So they were handed over, and everybody had this fear that if the companies who originated them disappeared, those efforts would disappear. People have no fear about that with us. I mean, there is no 800-pound gorilla. The amount of people who are leaders are fairly distributed. The members are very distributed, pretty evenly between North America, Europe, and APAC. And so there's a broad membership base who want to see this thing succeed. And the thing that keeps us together, the thing that motivates everybody to be a community is they want to innovate. They don't want to duplicate. I mean, how many times do you have to implement, an addition, right? Like, you don't have to. It's really very clear that there's just this sort of set of stuff that we know how to do. It's been done for 30 years or 50 years. Now we have, and again, we have taken advantage of our position in history, and we've seen what other people have done. For example, in Vector, our Vector, which was just ratified a couple weeks ago, is 100.
Oh, that's terrific. 100
instructions instead of 2,000 instructions or 400 instructions, and it has things like variable length registers, which is pretty unique, and it has all the other things you might expect with masking and strides and all that kind of stuff that you've come to expect in Vector. So we are able to go ahead and do something that's really cool, help our members, and we're totally member driven. It's what they're interested in working on that we do. We can't do everything, and we tell them that. I mean, it may even be like the bandwidth of the architectural review folks or the people who are doing the architecture tests or stuff like that. So the board has been very clear about what the priorities are. We had the big four this year: Vector, a thing called cryptoscalar, which I can talk about in a little bit, bit manipulation, which was a catch-up, and then a whole bunch of supervisor and privilege mode stuff, including hypervisor, which was one of our biggest gaps. And we nailed them all. 15 ratified specs 2 weeks ago, 0 in 2020.
That's amazing. And this is all, 15 ratified specs, ratified extensions in 2021.
So it's actually 44 extensions. We group them together. So we call them ratification packages. So for example, when you do Vector, there's a whole bunch of little extensions included, and you can pick and choose if you want. We do have this concept coming out this year called profiles, which are the set of extensions and instructions that work together, very much like the generational stuff on other architectures that may be named by like V7, V8, or some new symbolic name like Xeon or whatever. And so we.
I think that one's taken.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that they have their own naming conventions for this. But the concept of having a group of instructions that have been blessed for a year that you send towards the distros, you send towards the upstream projects, we hadn't had before, and we do have that in beginning phases now. Will be ratified and hopefully in Q1 next year, and the same thing's true with operating system standards as well. So things like ACPI or Discovery or things like that. So you can actually have people like Red Hat create a single distro for RISC-V and have it run from implementation to implementation for a rich OS application, general purpose computing platform.
Sound like you guys are extremely busy.
Exciting. It's been just a whirlwind, and I'm very grateful for everybody who's pitched in and helped us. And I think that, in some ways, I think it's great for humanity. It's great for the species. We're not duplicating effort and wasting, resources across the globe with stuff. And it breaks down barriers between countries. It breaks down barriers between companies. It breaks down barriers between cultures and time zones. So it really is an amazing effort, and I think they're going to be looking at this for 100 years, watching how this thing happened.
Yeah, and that was one of the most interesting things. Looking at the membership, looking at the people who are participating in in the development of the standards. Like you said, there's no 800-pound gorilla, but even then there are it's an incredible mix of corporations, big corporations, into the NXP, Microchip, all the way to, there's universities and academics and just individuals, by the thousands who are just interested in contributing their knowledge and their time to the greater whole.
Agreed.
And once again, I don't think I've ever seen that level of collaboration between those three entities before.
Yeah, I think it's an area that has been dying for something like this for some time. And so, and as you see success occur in people deploying products with it or making sure that the upstream projects are there or creating services or EDA tools or, the whole ecosystem and economy around RISC-V. Ultimately, people have to make money on this for this to be a viable thing in the world. And as you see more of it, it just attracts other people because not everybody's a first mover. And as they see the first movers be successful and put out a product based on RISC-V in a very flexible and easy way, then they go ahead and say, well, hey, we're going to try something. We'll try something small. We'll start small, and then we'll grow it from there. And that's what you see happening all over the place. And by the way, in every single piece of what I would call computer science, wearables, industrial controllers, disk drives, PCIe controllers, both for like ML, for graphics, edge computers, cloud computers, enterprise computers, HPC. I don't have it right here this second, but I have a soldering iron from pine64.org, and it's got a RISC-V processor in it. So I'd like to say everything from soldering irons to supercomputers.
One of the most influential members of the RISC-V community is SciFive, a leading developer of RISC-V intellectual property and development platforms. And if you're an application programmer looking to get started working with RISC-V, SciFive has developed the Hi5 Unmatched Linux development platform featuring a 5-core RISC-V processor with 8 gig of DDR4 memory. The board is in a standard mini ITX form factor with an ATX power supply connector and includes the usual PC expansion capabilities such as PCIe Gen 3 and dual M.2 slots. Learn more by visiting mauser.com/EIT22-1. You've talked a lot about, all these, these passionate people in their areas of expertise. Where would you say that are some primary areas that you guys are focusing on from an extension and a technical organization standpoint?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And look, when I came in, there was this big backlog. These things, as I told you, that we've been working on for years. And, part of my job was to help the teams be successful and get them out the door.
Right.
We prioritize stuff so we could do something. Often when you don't prioritize, you do everything poorly. And luckily, we have a board and a steering committee that's interested in doing that. We set the priorities very clearly, and we accomplished things. We made progress this year. We didn't clear out the backlog. There's still more.
I'm sure there's quite a bit.
Yeah, so there's still more left. I would say the first half of next year is going to be dominated by the backlog. So things like PAC-SIMD or BFloat 16, or there's just a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be done there. But beyond that, we're having discussions at all levels about the industries that care about using RISC-V and making sure that we have all the pieces they need in order to be successful. So if you're talking about, there's automotive embedded as opposed to the back end. Automotive embedded, you need the functional safety stuff, right? If you're talking about things like AI, ML, or graphics, you need more matrix operations. And so you're going to see us do some top-down direction, top-down prioritization from the board of directors and from the steering committee down to the 44 groups underneath it to say, look, if you have a choice between A and B, we're telling you A has priority. Doesn't mean you shouldn't continue to work on B, but if there's a conflict in resources, we know where we're investing consistently, so we get something done. And look, that's one of the things that's a challenge in being part of a community. You have to have patience more than you might have in a corporate world. It's not like I can, when I was running Solaris, I could tell people what to do. I can't tell people what to do here. I could just tell them what I would do if it were my choice, right? And I can tell them, I can help them, and what can I do to facilitate it, and so on and so forth. So it's I think it's going to be a big bunch of years here. The first one, very clearly 2021, but 2022 is going to be jam-packed, and I think it will, as we evolve our concepts about what is needed for members to be successful in certain of these deployments, certain of these workloads, then you'll see that fall into 2023, 2024, and again, totally driven by the members about what they think is important.
Yeah, and that's once again, like you said, it's the community drives the priorities, community drives all the work.
Agreed.
So, and in talking to our customers, both the embedded hardware guy and the application program, security is especially security at that design level is becoming more and more of a must-have. And I know you guys have multiple groups working on security issues. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the direction you guys are taking for extensions related to security, and both at the embedded and at the application level?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in this business for a while. And in the early 80s, like the only thing we knew about security was, the paper on how to break Unix, right? And right. That was it, right? And then all of a sudden, as time went on, obviously the need became important for a lot of reasons. And so, we were in a position where we were just kickstarting stuff, probably the years before I showed up. We were doing a little bit of what was called crypto, which both includes vector and scalar. I'll talk about that in a second. And then also some of the trusted execution environment stuff. But we weren't really actively painting the big picture. Now, look, there are big things out there like Trust Zone and so on and so forth, and some of it's aspirational and some of it's painting a picture. So we have a framework to put things in, and that's really important for the industry. We're in the process of developing a RISC-V security architecture that encompasses all the important components from the bottom, from embedded all the way up to data center kind of things. We recruited two very strong leaders to run the committee that drives security. One is Andy Dello, who's at Huawei as a fellow there, and the other is Manuel Offenberg from Seagate. And they're doing just a bang-up job working with really dedicated people. We have a security response team that deals with CERT kind of advisories. We have a blockchain team that's working on trying to make sure that there aren't gaps in the ISA that could make blockchain work more effectively, or there are things in the software ecosystem that need to be done. But from there, there's this crypto stuff, and originally, so if you take a look at other architectures, they have a vector instruction to do a bunch of the standard crypto algorithms, and we had a little bit of sequentiality to finish the vector spec, and then would work on crypto vector. But we had a gentleman from Bristol, from the university there, who said, "Hey, even if we get it done, it's not going to fit in embedded. The footprint's too big." And he had a really great idea to do crypto scalar. So if you took an AES 128 loop, it takes native instructions, just the ones that were before crypto, it'd take over 1,000 instructions to do one pass through the loop. A vector instruction is going to be one instruction, but the cost in footprint, in logic space, it's just going to be huge, right? So this guy said, okay, why don't we do crypto scalar? And so he created scalar instructions to do things that are implementable embedded, still an order of magnitude faster than the native instructions. So 75 instructions instead of 1,000. Right. And so that got ratified, and it's very exciting. And that's actually novel for RISC-V, and it's going to, enhance the ability in embedded to do the right thing. From there, things like control flow integrity, microarchitecture side channel attacks, more, memory protection based stuff. So there's just a huge set of efforts that are going on. And what we do inside of RISC-V now is we have special interest groups that have continuity. They do strategy, gaps, and prioritization, and they're the ones that decide what's important. And then they request from the steering committee to create a task group to do an ISA extension or to do some kind of software spec or something like that. And they get that done, they get in and they get out. But long term, it's those special interest groups, it's the committees that go ahead and prosecute the long-term viability, the long-term robustness of the solutions that are needed by our members.
Okay, yeah. Once again, that community driven, that's terrific. So it sounds like, it is also a high priority within, within the committees, within the technical groups, and the special interest groups within RISC-V. Well,
it's not only that, but we also, Krista and I, we re-architected the organization a bit. We wanted it to be scalable, number one. Mm-hmm. When I came, there was maybe about 15 groups. There's now 44 groups, and it has grown in lots of areas. It does two things. One is it helps us go ahead and do the things I just talked about, which is create the strategy, the gaps, the prioritization. But the other thing is these committees are responsible for signing off on everything that goes out the door. So if you're going to go do vector, security has to sign off, right? Because you don't want to be adding some kind of attack in. The same thing's true with software. You don't want to go ahead and implement something in an ISA and then require that the reader has to do an exercise in porting 100,000 lines of some library in order to make it useful, right?
Right.
And so those committees, the chairs, the vice chairs, have to scrutinize everything before a plan is approved, before it goes to public review, and before it's ratified to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So it's a checkpoint as well.
Okay, yeah, so it becomes a gate as well as it says that back end gate as well as that front end vision of what that particular committee is responsible for. So it literally is soup to nuts on whatever whatever topic they are responsible for.
Yeah, planning and checks and balances. It's just really great.
Sounds like it's working well, and it sounds like it'll be an efficient way to do things.
I think it's really hard when you start talking about the world we're in, where there are so many things that matter, that you really need to have people with disparate skill sets to have eyes on things.
Right. Yep, completely agree. As we talked about, one of the most exciting things about the RISC-V ISA is its versatility and how it will enable a wide variety of applications, including machine vision. For the embedded developer, Seed Studio has created the GAPwino GAP8 developer kit based on the GAP8 MCU from Greenwaves Technology. The GAP8 is a multi-core RISC-V processor designed to execute image and audio algorithms with extreme energy efficiency. The kit includes the Arduino Uno compatible mainboard, along with the Arduino Shield format sensor board and a low-power QVGA image sensor. Get started at Mauser.com/EIT22-2. So you had mentioned, all the work that you're doing. I mean, all the technical work. To you, Mark, what does a successful 2022 and even beyond? But starting with 2020, what does a successful 2022 look like for you? In terms of potential extensions or even the growth of the market itself.
Well, I have to tell you, for me, I like to have very simple means tests. Like when you start getting complex, it gets too hard to grade yourself. The one thing that matters more than anything else is RISC-V cores deployed, because success begets success. Adoption begets adoption. So everything, it goes back to that. The proliferation of successfully deployed RISC-V cores, that's got to be number one. Number two, in my mind, is getting people involved in RISC-V, right? And, I spend probably a third of my time in planning, a third of my time in day-to-day execution, and a third of my time in outbound. And the outbound is, you're talking to prospects or to analysts or press or stuff like that. But it's really, I'm sort of the chief technical evangelist inside of RISC-V. And so that piece is really critical. And it goes from, everywhere from students. We want them inculcated in the cult of RISC-V or the culture of RISC-V, and we want them excited about it. We want them to innovate with RISC-V, and so we're doing, for example, we're trying to seed 1,000 dev boards to academia, distros, and early adopters by June of 2022. And so I've started a bunch of programs, and that's one of them. And then the third thing is setting priorities and accomplishing things. Don't peanut butter spread your resources. Get those things that everybody agrees is most important. Make it clear to everybody we can't do everything. It just doesn't work, right? People have relief valves. They have the non-standard extensions. They can add themselves if they need something quicker. But in the meantime, we want something to move forward there. And then finally, because we came from this thing that I described before, where we mostly had ISA architects and we didn't really have software developers or ecosystem developers, there are still some pieces that I really want to see us find a concerted effort, for example, in optimizers, right? Other architectures have spent hundreds of person years, and every year they probably spend 20 to 40 person years improving their optimizers that are dedicated to those processors. So we're working on recruiting partners to go ahead and do big pieces of this. It has to be people who are willing to be doing this for a long time. There needs to be continuity. It's not a hit and run kind of thing. And there has to be enough people around in order to pull the stuff off. You can't have one person from one company and one person from another company. And so we're working on making that happen as well.
Lots of areas, for you to be focusing on between the, I didn't realize you did as much outreach as you did, as you do, excuse me. But I think you're the perfect person to do it. I can, once again, just in the times that I've talked to you, I can really truly feel that passion. And, obviously you've got the technical expertise to be able to answer, obviously, all my questions, plus I'm sure, quite a bit more in depth, especially at the university level and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's been a joy. I had no clue at how big this was when I took the job. And so I was very pleased to find the momentum you describe behind it, and the interest, and everybody's interested. We just heard from Intel working with Sci-Fi and doing a fab to do RISC-V stuff. We've talked with Amazon and FreeRTOS and Google and OpenTitan. There's a whole bunch of other nonprofit sister organizations like Open Hardware and Chips Alliance and Low Risk. So there's just a lot of different things in motion that are, I think, together creating this wonderfully perfect storm and making RISC-V adopted, successful, and interesting for a lot of folks.
We really appreciate you being with us and really giving a lot of the detailed information to our listeners and to our customers that that may not get just from reading stuff in media. And I think that your level of insight and the level of detail that you have is terrific.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Tech Between Us. Remember, this podcast is just one part of our original and ongoing content series, Empowering Innovation Together. You can find videos, articles, and more on RISC-V at mouser.com/empowering-innovation. And don't forget to join us for our next episode when we talk immersive technologies.